The vast American West knows no pity. When a wealthy landowner punishes his magnificent horse by abandoning it in a brutal canyon, the act is final. It is a calculated challenge to the wilderness itself. The animal suffers under the relentless sun, a symbol of unchecked power. But the desert keeps few secrets. A quiet, lonely rancher, riding the border of his meager land, discovers the victim. Now he faces a choice that carries the weight of the entire frontier: respect the law of property, or pay the deadly price for compassion. This is the deliberate work of punishment. The silence is fractured by the faint, rhythmic sound of boots crunching on shale. Ethan stops dead. He sees the horse. The initial shock drains away, replaced instantly by a profound, agonizing empathy. The sight of such potent life reduced to this desperate, passive suffering cuts him to the core. This is not the weariness of a day's work. This is calculated ruin. Softly, rough, easy now, easy, boy. He dips his palm into the canteen, wetting the horse's cracked, dusty muzzle. The stallion's ears flicker weakly, and he manages a slight, desperate lick. Ethan keeps up the steady rhythm, letting the horse take slow, agonizing sips. He pours small, controlled streams until the canteen is nearly empty, the thin stream of water disappearing instantly into the parched throat. The immediate danger of dehydration is momentarily stalled, but the stallion remains trapped. The rope chafes, digging into the rock-solid muscle of the neck. Ethan inspects the setup again. He knows this animal. It belongs to Clayton Vance. Interference with Vance's property is not just a breach of frontier protocol, it is a declaration of war. Vance views property, especially livestock, as an extension of his absolute dominion, but Ethan's moral rigidity forbids him from leaving. The life in front of him is more important than the property claim surrounding it. Ethan draws the sharp, well-maintained hunting knife from his belt sheath. He tests the edge with his thumb, then looks again at the suffering roan. The silence of the canyon presses in, making the snap of the tether seem deafeningly loud. A gunshot of defiance fired into the oppressive quiet. The heavy hemp falls limp into the dust. The stallion shivers, realizing he is unbound, but his legs are rubbery, weakened by hours of standing motionless, baking under the relentless sun. Ethan quickly resecures the knife and wraps the cut end of the hemp around his hand. He needs to lead the roan out, and he needs to do it now before the heat claims them both. More urgency now. Come on, big boy. You walk with me. We gotta move. The movement is agonizingly slow. Ethan braces his shoulder against the horse's flank, urging him with steady, low tones, guiding the heavy, staggering weight out of the canyon. Every 50 feet is a triumph. The rock walls eventually give way to the arid scrubland, but the journey to the Copperline claim is miles of exposed, unforgiving territory. Ethan keeps the roan moving, forcing a slow, halting pace, his own exhaustion mounting. He uses the last drops of the canteen water on the horse's mouth, sacrificing his own need to keep the powerful animal focused. He is committing the act of defiance. He is crossing the line. The Copperline claim is sparse: a cabin, a wind-battered corral, and a small struggling patch of barley. It is functional, defined by necessity, not wealth. Ethan manages to steer the roan into the small shaded corral, immediately providing him with fresh, cool well water and a ration of oats, resources Ethan could ill afford to spare. The roan drinks deeply, trembling, but the color slowly begins to return to his eyes. He knew the consequences the moment the knife blade touched the fiber. Clayton Vance, driven, calculating, and possessive, would see this as nothing less than a deliberate attack on his authority. Vance had demonstrated countless times that he viewed compassion as a weakness and interference as theft. Ethan spends the next few hours meticulously tending to the horse. He cleans the chafed skin, rubs down the sore muscles, and ensures the stallion is slowly rehydrating. Watching the animal regain its strength, the moral weight of his intervention feels justified, outweighing the cold dread of what was coming. The Ironwood Ranch headquarters is a fortress of dark wood and stone, reflecting Vance's absolute dominion. Jake holds a short, thick length of cut rope, the end of the hemp tether, faltering. The knot was intact, Mr. Vance. It wasn't pulled free. It was cut, clean. Vance turns slowly. His expression is dangerously calm, far worse than overt rage. He had deliberately left the roan stallion, a high-strung but noble-bearing animal he prized, but also frequently punished, as a stark declaration of ownership. I own this life, even its suffering. Low, measured tone cut. By a knife. On Ironwood property. Yes, sir. Whoever found him moved him. There were tracks. A man leading a stumbling horse, heading north, towards the copper line. Vance's gaze narrows, focusing on the distant sparse lights that mark Ethan Doyle's small homestead. The copper line claim sits right near the disputed borders of the Maverick territories, a constant irritating reminder that his control was not entirely absolute. Doyle, that quiet, scrawny little man, the one who thinks a fence line is negotiable. He thinks he can trespass. He thinks he can steal my property. He thinks his conscience allows him to dictate terms on my land. Get me 3 reliable men, armed. We are going to remind Mr. Doyle exactly what absolute ownership means in this territory, and we are going to collect my property. The moon is high, casting stark shadows. Ethan Doyle sits on his porch steps, rifle across his knees. He hasn't slept. He knows Vance won't wait for morning. The air is still, but it feels heavy, coiled. He looks toward the corral. The roan stallion is resting now, standing quietly, steadily munching hay. The animal is recovering, stronger and more centered. The sight confirms Ethan's conviction, bolstering his stoicism against the rising tide of fear. He made the right choice, regardless of the cost. Around midnight, he hears them. The rhythmic pounding of 4 sets of heavy horses, moving too fast, too purposefully for patrolling hands. Ethan rises, moving toward the small dark stable behind the cabin. He secures the rifle inside and returns, unarmed, waiting by the fence of the corral. He will meet them outside his house. If the violence is inevitable, he will keep it away from the animals and his shelter. The riders burst over the crest of the small rise. Clayton Vance leads, a colossal shadow, flanked by 3 grim-faced ranch hands. They pull up hard, scattering dust. Vance dismounts, moving with the heavy, uncompromising authority of a bull. His penetrating blue eyes find Ethan, voice rough with controlled fury. Doyle. Where is my horse? Ethan does not flinch, planting his feet firmly in the dust. Your horse is in my corral, Vance. He's been watered and fed, you admit it, you cut the tether. You stole Ironwood property. I untied an animal you left to die in Devil's Throat. That wasn't property, Vance. That was cruelty. Vance takes a step closer. The ranch hands shift uneasily, their hands near their holsters. The tension is so thick it is almost visible. Cruelty is my prerogative. That horse is mine. I decide its fate. You interfered with my business. That rope was my declaration. You spat on it. Steady, quiet, I saw an innocent life suffering needlessly. The rules of ownership don't extend to malice. I didn't steal him. I saved him. Semantics, Doyle. In the Maverick territories, ownership is absolute. You know the rules. You cross this line, you invite consequences. Now you open that gate or I will use the cutters and take him, and you will watch. Vance steps right up to the thin wire fence, separating his men from Ethan. The size difference is jarring. Ethan lean and weathered against Vance, tall and heavily built. You step onto my land, Vance, and you'll find out I'm not as quiet as you think. A sharp, dismissive laugh. You think you, a man who starves himself to feed his few head of cattle, can stand against me. Against Ironwood. Ethan gestures toward the corral where the roan stallion now stands, alert and much healthier than before. He is recovering. He stays here until he is strong enough to travel without collapsing. Then you can try to take him. But I warn you, Vance, I won't stand by and watch you destroy him again. Vance's face darkens. His tightly held control snaps. This is not about the horse anymore. It is about the affront to his dominion. You think that a sense of misplaced decency trumps my brand, Doyle? That weak sentimentality has no place in 1893. I will strip that decency from you. Vance lunges across the wire fence, grabbing the front of Ethan's shirt, pulling him violently forward. The thin wire of the fence snaps immediately, whipping back into the dust. The ranch hands move forward, ready to assist, but Vance shoves Ethan hard, sending him stumbling back toward the dark stable. Roaring, "This is the high cost of compassion, Doyle. You pay in blood." Ethan recovers quickly, realizing the fight is inevitable and must be concluded swiftly. He moves not with brute force, but with the wiry speed of a man who lives constantly on the defensive. Vance swings a heavy, club-like fist. Ethan ducks the blow, the air whistling past his ear, and drives a hard, sharp elbow into Vance's exposed ribs. Vance grunts, surprised by the resistance. The confrontation quickly devolves into a desperate, grinding struggle. Vance relies on his mass, attempting to bear Ethan down into the dirt, but Ethan uses the tight space and the shadows to his advantage, moving quickly around Vance's heavy swings. One of Vance's ranch hands starts to dismount, but Vance screams, waving him off. "Stay back, he is mine." This is a personal settling of accounts, the powerful landowner crushing the insignificant dissenter. Vance manages to corner Ethan against the stable wall. He lands a heavy body blow, staggering Ethan and knocking the wind from him. Ethan gasps, sinking slightly, the taste of dust and blood filling his mouth. Vance seizes the moment, grabbing Ethan by the neck, driving him hard against the rough wood. The sheer physicality of Clayton Vance, fueled by rage and possessiveness, is overwhelming. You should have left him there, Doyle. You should have respected property. Ethan struggles, choking, his hands clawing uselessly at Vance's thick forearms. His eyes, quiet until now, burn with a fierce protective fire. He manages a desperate last-ditch effort. He reaches behind him, feeling blindly along the rough wooden wall until his fingers close around the cold, familiar metal of the rifle he had stored inside the stable earlier. He doesn't pull it out. Instead, he uses the barrel as a lever. With a final surge of adrenaline, Ethan pushes the rifle barrel hard against the wall, throwing his body violently sideways. The unexpected shift of weight, combined with the momentum, sends Vance staggering off balance. Vance releases his grip just long enough for Ethan to twist free. Ethan gasps for air, staggering sideways but remains upright. Vance charges again, blinded by fury, intending to flatten Ethan. But Ethan, now clear-headed, sees the heavy, deliberate charge coming. Instead of dodging, Ethan sidesteps, using Vance's own momentum against him, and drops his shoulder into Vance's waist just as the rancher passes. It is a calculated trip, not a block. Clayton Vance, all 400 pounds of him, crashes heavily to the ground, the impact shaking the dry earth. He lands awkwardly, his breath exploding from him in a painful bellow. Vance struggles immediately to rise, but the weight of his own body, combined with the awkward landing, slows him. Ethan is already moving, not toward the fallen rancher, but toward the stable door he had just used as a weapon pivot. He yanks the door open, retrieving the rifle, pulling it out into the moonlight. He swings the barrel up, aiming not at Vance, but at the sky above the corral. The shot rips through the quiet night. The ranch hands on horseback flinch, startled. Vance freezes, halfway to his feet, staring at the rifle barrel now steadily aimed toward his center mass. The noise alarms the roan stallion, who rears up slightly in the corral, but the stout bars hold him. Panting, disbelief coloring his voice. "You wouldn't dare." His voice low, but carrying the absolute certainty of a man who has reached his limit. "The copper line is my claim. This is my property, Vance, and that horse stays until I decide he's ready. You and your men ride out now. If you come back, the next shot won't be aimed at the moon." The ranch hands look to Vance, waiting for the command. Vance, slowly regaining his footing, stands completely still. He is assessing Ethan, the quiet, lonely man he had so easily dismissed, now standing armed, resolute, and backed by a moral authority Vance could not comprehend. The sheer audacity of Ethan's stance, the quiet certainty of his threat, momentarily paralyzes the volatile rancher. Vance looks past Ethan to the stallion, his property, now protected by this insignificant man. He sees not defiance, but an intractable obstacle rooted in an alien concept of right. Vance knows a full-scale assault now would lead to bloodshed, possibly his own, and would certainly draw the attention of the territorial marshal, something even his power could not entirely disregard. Spitting dust, you think you've won something, Doyle. You think this animal makes you a man. You just earned yourself an enemy that won't forget this slight. I earn myself a clear conscience, Vance. That's worth more than all of Ironwood Ranch. Vance turns to his men, his voice heavy with frustrated malice. We ride. Leave the dust to the scavengers. The men obey instantly, turning their horses. Vance stares at Ethan one last penetrating moment, a silent promise of future violence, before mounting his own horse heavily. They thunder back the way they came, disappearing back over the rise toward the Ironwood Ranch. The silence returns, heavier now, stamped with the aftermath of violence. Ethan stands perfectly still, the rifle heavy in his hands, watching until the last sound of their retreat fades. Only then does he lower the weapon, his body trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the exertion and the immense release of tension. He walks slowly to the corral. The roan stallion watches him, still nervous but no longer desperate. Ethan reaches out, stroking the magnificent red-brown coat, a ghost of a smile. It seems you're a Copperline horse now, at least for a while. He had intervened. He had defied the unwritten laws of the frontier and the absolute rule of Clayton Vance. He had acted on decency, and he had survived the high cost of his compassion. The solitude of the Copperline claim felt different now. It was not just isolation but sanctuary, earned with conviction and defended with courage. Ethan leans against the rail, looking out over the maverick territories. The immense darkness stretches out, but within the small circle of light at his ranch, the roan stallion is safe. The moral weight of intervention was heavy, but the alternative, indifference, would have been crushing. He had made his choice, and the consequences, however severe they might become, were worth the life saved. The dust settled long ago, but the tension in the air remains, thick and metallic. The first light of morning paints the scrubland in harsh, uncompromising golds and ochres. The roan stallion is restless, energized by the cool water and the oats. His coat, dry now, flashes the deep red-brown of his lineage. He is still marked by the severity of his ordeal, ribs prominent, eyes cautious, but the spirit is returning. He paws the ground, testing his strength. Ethan runs a hand over the rough wood of the fence, tracing the splintered path where Vance had thrown him against the stable wall. The cost of the defiance is already physical, but the true price will be paid in solitude and resources. He knows Vance won't return for a direct frontal attack today. Vance is calculating. The confrontation last night was driven by immediate white-hot fury over the insult to his dominance. Now, Vance will coolly assess Ethan's weaknesses. Ethan's weakness is his isolation and his dependency on fragile infrastructure, the few miles of fence line, the shallow well, the necessity of trade in the sparsely populated maverick territories. Vance won't send men to fight. Hell send them to starve him out. The heavy imported curtains are drawn in Vance's office, filtering the brutal sunlight into dusty columns of light. Vance sits at his immense desk, a map of the maverick territories spread before him. A thick red line marks the sprawling boundary of Ironwood Ranch. A small irritating dot sits near the lower border, the Copperline claim. Vance's face is set, a bruise darkening his jaw where Ethan's elbow connected. His eyes, penetrating blue, cold with methodical rage, are fixed on the map. The physical humiliation is secondary to the strategic offense. Ethan had used sentimentality, the weakest currency of the frontier, to challenge absolute power. That sentimentality had to be destroyed along with Ethan, quietly tapping the map near Copperline Water. What is the state of the runoff channels leading to Doyle's claim? They're dry this time of year, sir. He relies mostly on that well. It's weak, but it's his only source this close to the border. Not for long. The South Fork of the Mesa Wash. It feeds the main aquifer. I want 3 teams. They are to work this week, non-stop. I want the main flow diverted entirely to the Ironwood Reservoir. I want the water table under Copperline to drop 5 feet. Fast. Jake nods, swallowing hard. This is not casual ranch maintenance. This is slow, deliberate execution. Continuing, his voice gaining momentum and the fences. I want every single length of Doyle's northern boundary line cut. Not pulled down, cut. Not the section near Devil's Throat, that's too exposed. The section where his cattle graze near the Red Hills. If his few head of cattle wander, they are now mine. Stray property on Ironwood land. Hell notice. He patrols those lines constantly, but he cannot patrol 10 miles of open wire alone while standing guard over a stolen horse. I want him stretched thin, worried about his survival, not my pride. He will realize that saving that damned horse cost him everything he owns. Vance looks up at Jake, a cold, satisfied glint in his eyes. He thinks he has a clear conscience. I will make that conscience his burial shroud. Now go. I want to see dust rising on the Mesa Wash before noon. The relentless sun has returned. The air is still oppressively hot. Ethan is fighting a losing battle. He has been riding, mending, and rationing. The roan stallion, now visibly recovered, is a glorious, frustrating liability. He is consuming water and feed that Ethan needs for his 2 working mules and his handful of scrawny longhorns. Ethan had found the first cut fence line yesterday. Not a single break, but dozens of them, meticulously sliced across a mile of territory. He spent 8 agonizing hours riding and repairing, knowing that every minute away from the claim was a minute exposed to whatever Vance had planned next. The real trouble started this morning. He stands by his well, The pump is fighting him now, yielding less and less water with increasing difficulty. He can feel the water table receding, the telltale sign of heavy, organized diversion upstream. Vance is using the resources of Ironwood, manpower and machinery to choke him. Ethan sinks onto the ground, running a hand over the dry, cracked earth near the well housing. To himself, "Lo Hez not going to fight me. He's going to dry me out." He watches the roan stallion. The horse is magnificent, pacing the corral, testing the boundaries. He is a creature of high-strung, noble bearing, clearly impatient with confinement. He is the physical manifestation of Ethan's moral decision, a living, breathing debt. If Ethan releases the roan, Vance wins, confirming that compassion is indeed a weakness that can be beaten into submission. If Ethan keeps the roan, he starves. Ethan pulls out the battered tin canteen, checking the meager supply. He needs to ride out, check the cattle, and try to find an alternative water source. Perhaps the old spring near the disputed borders, but that means leaving the roan unguarded. He glances toward the stable. His rifle is inside. He straps the knife back onto his belt, the same knife that cut the hemp tether. He grabs a spool of fresh wire and fence staples. He has to secure the cattle. The horse will have to wait. This section of the Maverick Territories is particularly desolate, defined by red shale and thorny scrub. Ethan rides his mule slowly, methodically inspecting the new wire he stretched yesterday. The sheer scale of Vance's economic assault is daunting. Ethan is fighting the weight of an empire with a spool of cheap wire and stubborn principle. He finds his meager herd of cattle, 6 adults and a couple of calves, nervously milling near a waterhole he had dug out with sweat and prayer 2 seasons ago. It is bone dry. Vance's water diversion is working faster than Ethan anticipated. Ethan dismounts and approaches his lead cow, a familiar, docile creature. He checks her udder. She is already showing signs of distress. If he doesn't water them, they will be too weak to drive to a distant source, and Vance's men will simply collect them as strays. He is faced with a horrifying realization. Vance is forcing him to choose between saving the horse, which represents his soul, and saving his livelihood, which represents his life. Ethan quickly rigs up a temporary shelter for the cattle, a few scrub branches, and his own saddle blanket for shade. He rations the last of his canteen water to the calves, a painful sacrifice. He cannot leave his animals here, but he cannot move them yet. He has to get back to the copper line claim. The thought of Vance sending men while he is miles away, desperate and alone, claws at his stomach. Ethan returns under the cover of a moonless sky, exhausted, dust caking his throat. He tends to the mules first, giving them a precious half-bucket of the remaining well water. He goes to the corral. The roan stallion recognizes his presence, nickering softly, anticipating the oats. Ethan pours the smallest measure of grain into the trough. Roughly, "You're lucky, you're worth saving." He sits in the dark stable, his rifle across his knees. He drinks the last of his own ration of water. He knows he has 24 hours, maybe 48, before he is entirely dry. The cattle are suffering. He is suffering. And the roan is eating his future. A sharp, distinctive sound cuts through the silence, a rock hitting the side of the stable. Ethan freezes, rifle instantly raised. He hears a whisper from the darkness, just outside the corral. "Doyle, got something for you." It's not Jake or Vance. It's a young ranch hand, one of the men who works the peripheral borders, known for being less loyal to Ironwood's brutal methods. Ethan stays still, aimed at the sound. "Who is it?" "Just delivering a message. Vance told me to throw it over the fence. He wants to make sure you read it." A piece of heavy parchment, weighted by a small stone, arcs over the corral and lands near Ethan's feet. The young man's horse immediately retreats, galloping hard back toward the Ironwood boundary. Ethan retrieves the paper, holding it up to the faint light leaking from the stable cracks. It is not signed, but the command structure is unmistakable. The message is brief, typewritten, and stark. The Ironwood boundaries are being reinstated. All trespassers will be prosecuted as thieves. The roan stallion is Ironwood property. Its value, plus damages incurred for trespass and destruction of Ironwood maintenance equipment fence cutters, is set at $400. You have until the morning of the day after tomorrow to pay the debt in full and release the property. Failure to comply will result in the seizure of all Copperline assets and subsequent filing for territorial repossession. Ethan's grip tightens around the paper. $400. That was easily 10 years of savings, Money he didn't have, money that didn't even exist. Vance wasn't just demanding the horse back. He was demanding total, irrevocable ruin. He was using the legal mechanism of the territory to steal Ethan's entire claim, all triggered by one act of compassion. The reality hits Ethan with brutal clarity. Vance will not stop. He will not be satisfied until Ethan is broken, publicly and financially ruined. As a warning to anyone else who dared to question Ironwood's dominion, Ethan crumples the paper, tossing it into the dirt. He looks at the magnificent, recovering horse. The roan raises his head, sensing the renewed anxiety. Ethan makes his decision. He cannot win an economic war against Vance. He cannot hold out indefinitely without water. He cannot save his cattle and the horse. But he can ensure that Vance does not get the satisfaction of the total victory. The moral weight of intervention shifts into the strategic weight of survival. He spends the next hour calculating. The cattle are too weak to move far without water, but he has to try. He has to scatter them, giving them a slim chance of survival in the open territory, where they might avoid Vance's claim. The mule, packed with his few valuables and the last of his feed, will accompany the horse. The roan stallion cannot stay, and if Ethan leaves, he cannot stay either. The Copperline claim is lost either way. But Vance stated, failure to comply will result in the seizure of all Copperline assets. Vance wants the assets, and he wants the horse back to administer the final fatal punishment. Ethan walks out to the corral, opening the gate. The roan walks out, nervous, stretching his legs. Firmly, we ride now, not back to Vance, away from him. He quickly saddles the roan with his own best saddle. He would ride the mule, leaving the recovered horse to carry the burden. He takes only the essential survival gear, the rifle, ammunition, a bedroll, and the almost empty canteen. The first objective is the Red Hills. He must free his cattle, allowing them to disperse. The second objective is the Western Trail, the dangerous path out of the Maverick territories toward the distant, disputed lands of New Mexico. He looks back at the cabin, the only home he had built, now surrendered to the desert and Vance's calculation. He feels a pang of loss, sharp and swift, but no regret. Ethan leads the small procession, himself on the mule, the roan stallion tethered loosely behind. He moves silently through the pre-dawn gloom, guided only by memory and the dim stars. He reaches the Red Hills. He spurs the mule forward, using sharp cries to frighten the half-dozen cattle into movement, urging them away from the dry hole, toward the scrub. Gambling that distance, and luck will save them from Vance's rounding cruise. They stagger off into the darkness, a desperate hope of survival. Now only the horse remains. Ethan turns the mule west, towards the old Western Trail, a route known for its dangers, but equally known for its lack of Vance's influence. They ride for nearly an hour. The sun is about to break the horizon, and the land is transitioning from cool black to bruised purple. Suddenly, the familiar sound of heavy hooves approaches from the south, closing fast. Vance is patrolling his own borders, anticipating Ethan's move. Ethan pulls the mule and the roan behind a large outcrop of weathered rock, dismounting quickly. He secures the animals, pulls the rifle, and positions himself behind the rock. He is ready for the inevitable collision, knowing this time Vance will not stop at a simple beating. This will be the final stand. Vance dismounts, moving forward with that heavy, uncompromising step. He spots the hoofprints disappearing behind the outcrop, voice booming across the open land. I know you're there, Doyle. The sun is up. The deadline is past. You forfeited your claim. Now, you forfeit your life. Ethan stands up slowly, stepping into view, the rifle held steady across his chest. The roan stallion shifts nervously behind him. Calm despite the tremor in his hands. I forfeited nothing, Vance. You stole my livelihood. You tried to starve me out for doing what was right. Right? Right is keeping what is yours, Doyle. You came onto my land, cut my property and harbored a stolen animal. You invited this ruin, ignoring the flanking movement, addressing Vance directly. You tied that horse to a rock and left him for dead. That wasn't ownership, it was malice. You are no rancher. You are a tyrant. His face contorts with rage. You will not lecture me on dominion. Drop the rifle, Doyle. I will give you 5 seconds to surrender the property before my men open fire. You can kill me, Vance. You have the men and the guns, but you will not take this horse back to abuse him. I will not allow it. Vance smiles, a terrible, cold expression of absolute power. You think a bullet stops me, Doyle. You are already ruined. Ironwood will seize Copperline by noon. You are homeless, horseless, and dead. What is one more body? Ethan lowers the rifle just slightly, shifting his focus. This is the moment. He needs to leverage the one thing Vance values more than the horse, his public image of controlled dominance. If you kill me now, Vance, you still lose. Vance pauses, intrigued and irritated by the claim. Explain yourself, miserable thief. That roan stallion is yours. Your brand is on him. If you take him back now, it is purely for revenge. If you kill me, you satisfy your vengeance. But if you take him, Vance, he will be the constant living symbol of your failure. Vance stares. The roan, restless, steps slightly out from the shadow of the rock. I saved him because I value life. You want to kill him because you value control. If you kill me here, everyone in the territories will know why. Not because I stole, but because I dared to show compassion where you showed cruelty. Ethan locks eyes with Vance, pushing the absolute truth forward, weaponizing Vance's pride. If you return him to Ironwood, every ranch hand, every rival, every man who passes through your territory will look at that magnificent animal and remember that the pathetic, scrawny little man from Copperline survived long enough to save what you tried to destroy. You will never truly own that horse again. He will always be the horse I saved. Vance stands rigid, his penetrating blue eyes flickering between the rifle and the roan stallion. Ethan's words cut deeper than any physical blow. The public perception of his power, the total dominion that demanded compliance, was being undermined by a single living creature. The roan had become a monument to Vance's impotent rage. If Vance kills Ethan and takes the horse, the animal becomes an even greater, more lasting symbol of the cruelty Ethan had rightly exposed. If he leaves the horse, his voice now dangerously low, controlled, every syllable laced with defeated fury, you think you can teach me a lesson, Doyle? You think your self-righteousness makes you smart? Not flinching. I think that horse is a symbol of my conscience, and you cannot steal that. Vance looks at his men, then back at Ethan. The decision is agonizing. He wants to crush Ethan, but the humiliation of making the roan a pariah, a living testament to a moral loss, is too great a risk to his absolute authority. He cannot have his finest animal being whispered about as the horse Doyle saved. To his men, spitting the words, "We ride out." Jake starts to protest, confused by the sudden retreat, but Vance silences him with a brutal glare. To Ethan, keep the damned beast. He is worthless now, contaminated by your weakness. I will strip that land from you legally, Doyle. You won the battle for a horse, but you have lost the war for your life. Vance mounts his horse, his movements heavy and tight with suppressed violence. He does not look at the roan again. He stares only at Ethan, promising a future of calculated malice. Final, icy command. If I ever see your tracks on Ironwood territory again, I won't bother with the law. Vance spurs his horse, galloping away, followed quickly by his confused ranch hands. They disappear into the morning haze, the sound of their retreat slowly swallowed by the immense arid silence of the Maverick territories. Ethan remains behind the rock, rifle still aimed, until the last whisper of dust settles. He slowly lowers the weapon, his entire body slumping with exhausted relief. He had survived the inevitable collision. He had paid the cost, losing his land, but saving the life he defended. He walks back to the roan stallion, stroking the horse's muzzle. The roan is safe. Voice horse, we don't have a home anymore, big boy, but we have the trail. He mounts the mule, guiding the roan onto the western trail. The sun finally crests the horizon, bleaching the world in a harsh light. The Copperline claim is gone, claimed by Vance's calculating hand. But Ethan is free. He and the roan are heading west, toward the unknown, leaving behind the brutal confines of Vance's dominion. The high cost of compassion had been paid in property, but its reward was integrity and a second chance for a noble animal. The loneliness of the trail ahead is immense, but this time, Ethan is not solitary. He has the roan stallion, a constant, powerful reminder of the choice he made, a testament to decency surviving in an unforgiving world. The silence that descends upon the high plains is heavier than the sound of thunder. It is the silence of absence, the rapid retreat of human malice. The sound of Clayton and his men galloping back toward the east diminishes until it is completely swallowed by the vast, indifferent expanse of the Maverick territories. Ethan remains still, his breath ragged, holding the rifle steady, even though the immediate threat has vanished. He waits, measuring the receding cloud of dust until only the shimmering heat remains, a visual distortion marking where his enemy once stood. Slowly, carefully, he lowers the rifle. His muscles protest the sudden release of tension. He sinks onto the sun-baked earth behind the scrub oak, ignoring the biting shale and the thorns that snag his worn denim. The roan stallion, the cause and catalyst of this sudden, violent rupture in Ethan's life, remains magnificent and alert. He is still tethered by the mule's lead rope to a sturdy, exposed root, a temporary measure taken in the panic of the confrontation. The horse shifts his weight, tossing his head once, shaking off the residual fear. He eyes the empty space where the aggressors had been. Ethan's gaze drifts from the horse to the rifle, then to the east. He had survived. He had kept the roan, but the victory felt entirely hollow, tainted by the immediate devastating cost. He had expected a bullet. He had prepared for a vicious physical brawl. He had not anticipated Clayton's calculated retreat, nor the weaponized pride that drove it. Clayton had understood, perhaps better than Ethan himself, that killing the man who saved his prize animal would only sanctify the deed. By letting Ethan go, Clayton had simply changed the parameters of the fight, turning a skirmish over property into a strategic war of attrition against Ethan's very existence. Clayton had declared the horse worthless, contaminated by compassion. That single sentence, delivered with venomous control, cut deeper than any brand. It meant that the roan, despite its lineage and power, was no longer a simple asset to be recovered. It was a symbol of Clayton's moral failure, and therefore, an object he could not tolerate near Ironwood. Ethan forces himself up. He can feel the immediate, pressing urgency of their situation. Every minute he lingers here is a minute Clayton uses to execute his bureaucratic ruin. He untethers the roan, giving the horse a reassuring stroke along the powerful neck. Low, his voice still shaking slightly. "We're not safe until we're ghosts, big boy." He looks at the mule, Barrel, standing patiently, laden with the meager supplies. Barrel is tired, already showing the strain of the forced march in the pre-dawn darkness. The mule is a liability now, slow and demanding precious water. Ethan gently unsaddles the mule, transferring the worn leather saddle to the roan. The action is symbolic. The mule is for maintenance and endurance. The roan is for speed and survival. The roan barely reacts, accepting the heavy gear with a noble, patient stance. He carefully repacks the remaining supplies onto Barrel's back, the heavy bedroll, the extra rifle cartridges, the small sack of oats and the spool of fence wire. The weight is too much for the journey ahead. Ethan takes the canteen and his rifle. Everything else he leaves with the mule. Barrel is tethered to the scrub oak, given a final handful of the limited oats, and a long, painful gaze from Ethan, a painful whisper. "Go free, old friend. You deserve better than this flight." He slaps the mule's flank, urging him away from the spot, hoping Barrel will drift south, finding some overlooked spring, avoiding the immediate danger zone of Ironwood's seizing crews. It is a desperate gamble, a calculated abandonment born of necessity. Ethan cannot afford to be sentimental about the mule, not when the roan's life and his own hangs in the balance. He mounts the roan stallion. The change is immediate and exhilarating. The power beneath him is immense, focused. The roan moves with purpose, sensing the direction and the renewed urgency. They turn west, leaving behind the small, scattered possessions, the ghosts of the Copperline claim, and the physical evidence of the confrontation. The office is cool, shielded by the drawn curtains, but the atmosphere is ice-cold. Clayton is not satisfied, but he is executing the next phase with clinical precision. Jake stands before the immense desk. The map is still spread out, but now it is annotated with fresh, aggressive markings. His voice stripped of emotion, purely mechanical. "The legal action is only the beginning, Jake. Doyle thinks he saved the horse. He thinks he achieved some moral victory. We will show the entire territory that principle means nothing against capital. The rider is already at the territorial seat, sir. Filed the debt and the lien on the roan. Good. But paper is easily forgotten. We need a physical statement. The public needs to see what happens when you interfere with Ironwood." Clayton rises and walks to a heavy iron safe built into the wall. He turns the dial with precise, practiced movements, opening the massive door. He pulls out a set of large, professionally printed posters, crisp and formal, stamped with the territorial seal. These are notices of repossession. "I want 3 men, your most ruthless, to ride out, not toward the border, but into the nearest settlements. Hang these notices publicly. Every saloon, every general store, every church door. He hands a poster to Jake. The text is formal, brutal, and clear. The Copper Line claim and all associated assets are hereby seized by the Ironwood Ranch under territorial law due to debt non-payment and property damage, totaling $475. The owner, Ethan Doyle, is declared insolvent and a fugitive thief, subject to immediate apprehension. Reading the punitive total $475? That's almost twice the value of the claim, sir. A ghost of a cold smile damages. We charge for the labor of the diversion crews, the repair of the fences and the insult. Doyle's moral stand is expensive, Jake. We make sure everyone knows the exact price. Continuing, his eyes fixed on the map and the well. When you return to Copper Line, I want it sealed. Use concrete. I want that well permanently shut down. No one uses Ironwood's diverted water, not even the desert. I want Copper Line to be a monument to arid total control. It will stand forever, branded and dry as a warning. Jake understands now. This isn't just about destroying Ethan. It's about weaponizing the environment and the legal system to solidify Ironwood's image as an unstoppable, pitiless force. The physical act of sealing the well, the source of life, is the ultimate declaration of dominance. Understood, sir. The well will be sealed by sundown tomorrow. See to it. And Jake, when you post the notices, make sure they know about the horse. Tell them the animal is stolen, but that it is now tainted, a burden. Emphasize that Doyle rides a curse, not a prize. Spread the word that the roan will bring nothing but ruin to anyone who harbors the fugitive. Clayton looks toward the vast, empty plains stretching west. He had lost the immediate confrontation, but he had secured the permanent destruction of his rival. Ethan and the roan push hard. They travel in long, exhausting shifts, resting only when the sun is at its zenith or when the moon offers protective darkness. The roan is a revelation. He moves across the rough terrain with an easy grace that belies the distance covered. Ethan, though constantly hungry and dehydrated, feels a strange, resonant strength derived from the animal's resilience. The roan embodies the tenacity Ethan needed. He had located a small hidden spring yesterday, enough to fill the canteen and water the horse, but the margin of survival is impossibly thin. Every calorie is counted, every ounce of water meticulously measured. Ethan stops at a dry wash, dismounting to rest in the slim shadow of an overhang. He opens the battered tin canteen, taking a small, almost ceremonial sip, then gives the remainder to the roan. He pulls the few pieces of hardtack from his pack, the last of Finch's generosity. He chews slowly, forcing the meager nutrition to sustain him. His thoughts constantly drift back to the Copper Line claim. He envisions the Ironwood brand searing into the well pump, the sealing of the water source. The sheer spite of it chills him more than the thought of a bullet. Clayton isn't fighting a man. He's fighting life itself. He feels the physical and emotional residue of the trauma. The days of riding and the nights of watching have worn him thin. He had always been solitary, but this enforced isolation, this fugitive status, adds a layer of existential fear. He is a man without paper, without property, defined only by the price on his head and the animal at his side. He runs his hand along the roan's flank, tracing the edges of the Ironwood mark. The brand is permanent, a constant risk. He needs to reach the settlements on the far side of the border quickly. Not to trade. He cannot risk contact. But to gauge the depth of Clayton's influence, to confirm Finch's warning. He pulls out the rifle, checking the mechanism. It is his only bargaining chip, his only defense against the inevitable greed of bandits or the organized malice of Ironwood's territorial watchmen. The relationship with the roan deepens. The horse has shed the last vestiges of his pampered, abused existence. He is lean, hardened, focused. When Ethan sleeps, the roan stands guard, his ears constantly swiveling. He no longer seems like Ironwood's prize, but simply the horse. Ethan's horse. Ethan often wakes to find the roan standing close, breathing steadily, in the profound silence of the open country. That steady breathing is the sound of companionship, a concrete reality in a world stripped bare. After nearly 3 weeks on the trail, Ethan and the roan finally reach the unofficial boundary of the new territory. It is marked less by clear lines and more by a distinct shift in the architectural style of the infrequent outposts. The heavy, fortified structures of the Maverick territories give way to ramshackle, less protected buildings, signifying a chaotic and less governed region. Ethan stops the roan a half-mile outside the first outpost, a combination trading post and makeshift tavern known as the Crossing. He waits until dusk, letting the shadows lengthen before he makes his approach. He needs information, but cannot risk being seen with the roan. He dismounts, leading the roan into a thicket of juniper trees. He waters the horse from a small, clear stream that flows freely here, a sight that makes his heart ache with the memory of the sealed well back at Copperline. To the horse, stay hidden. You're worth more trouble than I can handle. He covers the roan with his tattered bedroll to obscure the prominent brand in case anyone stumbles upon the spot. Ethan straps the rifle across his back, pulls his wide-brimmed hat low and walks toward the crossing, looking like any other dusty, desperate traveler. The interior is smoky, dimly lit by kerosene lamps and packed with rough men, miners, prospectors, and a few small-time ranchers seeking trade. The noise is loud, the low roar of conversation, the clatter of dice, and the mournful tuning of a fiddle player. Ethan takes a seat in the darkest corner near a sputtering fire. He orders a plate of beans and coffee, paying with the few silver coins Finch had slipped into the pouch. He eats slowly, listening, a ghost among the living. The conversation is typical frontier talk, cattle prices, land disputes, and the constant grumbling about water scarcity. Then he hears it, a low conspiratorial murmur from a group of ranchers clustered near the bar. Ironwood doesn't play fair. Heard what they did to that poor bastard over the roan? Doyle? Yeah, shameful. He was a small player, but decent. Vance couldn't stand the insult. It's not the horse, you fools, it's the lesson. Vance used the law like a whip, branded the whole Copperline claim, filed a debt so big the poor sod can't ever resurface, $475. Who owes that kind of debt for saving a horse? He was carrying notices all the way out here. They're posted at the freight office. Said Doyle is a thief and the horse is under lien. Said anyone helping him is harboring stolen property. Ethan feels the reality settle like a physical weight on his chest. Clayton's reach was even longer than he feared. He is not just ruined. He is legally and publicly shackled. He cannot work, cannot trade, cannot settle without immediate apprehension and the seizure of the roan. He finishes the beans, the taste turning to ash in his mouth. He needs to leave before the dim light gives way to true darkness, and someone examines his face too closely. As he rises, the fiddle player strikes up a tune. Ethan moves toward the door, trying to maintain an anonymous slouch. He passes the freight office, and though he doesn't stop, his eyes catch the sight. A crisp official poster, stamped with the seal of the Maverick Territories, detailing the debt and the status of Ethan Doyle. Fugitive. Insolvency declared. The shame, coupled with the profound helplessness, grips him. He had paid the cost, but the debt followed him like a relentless shadow. He slips out the door and back into the cool night air. Ethan returns to the roan, adrenaline coursing through him, replacing the weariness. He is galvanized by the confirmation of Clayton's comprehensive spite. He quickly removes the bedroll and examines the roan's bridle and hooves. They must ride through the night. He feels a momentary despair. Where can he go? The entire established world is closed to him. The debt, the lien, the brand, they are a network of invisible iron fences surrounding him. He looks at the roan, then back toward the distant Maverick Territories. Clayton's ultimate goal was not the recovery of the asset, but the destruction of the moral standing the asset represented. Ethan realizes he still holds the single most powerful card, the roan stallion itself. As long as the horse is with him, alive and free, it remains a testament to Clayton's defeat. If he abandoned the horse now, or allowed it to be seized, the ruin would be complete, confirming to the whole territory that compassion always fails. To the roan intensely we ride until they run out of paper, or we run out of dessert. He mounts the roan, pulling the bridle west, away from the outpost, away from the false promise of civilization, deeper into the unsettled, challenging frontier lands of the new territory. They ride through the cold, dark hours, guided only by the scattered starlight. The sun rises on a radically changed landscape. They have gained significant distance from the border. The land here is harsher, marked by towering buttes and deep ravines, far less suitable for conventional ranching. It is territory that demands constant vigilance, but is too dangerous for organized patrols. Ethan feels the subtle shift in the air. The true boundary is crossed. Here, the law is primal, survival of the fittest, and the law of the rifle. He stops the roan on a high mesa overlooking a vast broken country. He dismounts, allowing the roan to graze on the sparse, tough grass. He pulls out the rusted, battered knife, the same knife that severed the hemp tether, and begins to sharpen it against a small whetstone. He needs a plan. He cannot simply run forever. He must find a way to live, to work, without attracting the attention that the roan's brand guarantees. He considers the Ironwood brand. He could try to hide it, perhaps scar the hide further to obscure the V, but that would only inflict more pain on the animal and likely draw more scrutiny than a simple, registered brand. He decides against desecrating the animal further. The scar remains. Let it stand as the truth. He sits beside the roan, drinking the last of the canteen water. He has lost everything material, but he has the strength of his own choices. A deep sense of peace, hard-won and fragile, settles over him. He is free of the constraints of property and the demands of rivalry. His life is reduced to simple, undeniable truths: the needs of his body, the power of the horse, and the direction of the setting sun. He spends the day resting, utilizing the natural camouflage of the area. He is a hunter now, relying on stealth and instinct. As evening approaches, Ethan saddles the roan once more. They cannot settle, but they can move purposefully. He has heard whispers of a remote, abandoned mining town far to the west, beyond the reach of any major territorial influence, a place where the law is defunct and the desperate congregate. It is a terrible risk, but the only direction left. He looks at the magnificent animal beneath him, the roan stallion, the creature of Ironwood, now the partner of a fugitive. A resolute breath. The trail doesn't end, does it? It just changes. He urges the roan forward. They ride off the mesa, descending into the broken country, embracing the unknown dangers of the true frontier. The silence is no longer threatening, but an ally. The high cost of compassion had bought them this, the unending trail, the constant threat, but also the singular, unwavering companionship of principle. They were alone, together. Like this? Subscribe for the next level.